Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see everyone here tonight with so many competing Earth Day webinars today. I want to personally thank you so much for joining us. My name is Bridget Degnan. I am the Cook County Commissioner in the 12th District. And tonight we are presenting the second in our series of environmental webinars. Tonight is the What Government is Doing for the Environment webinar. And I am so very thrilled to be joined by our moderator tonight, who is a personal hero of mine, United States Senator Tammy Duckworth, and my fellow panelists. We should have State Senator Sara Feigenholtz on sometime soon. She is currently busy in session on the Senate floor. She represents the 6th District, and her representatives should be here if she is not. Trenton Crawford is her staffer. We should also expect maybe State Representative Ann Williams, who represents the 11th District. Her staffer, Chief of Staff Lauren, is on to answer questions. Ann Williams during session is also on the House floor. I think she was there till 11 p.m. last night, so we're hoping she'll join us. We are also joined by Alderman Scott Waguespack from the 32nd Ward, a strong environmental advocate, and also a fellow United States Peace Corps volunteer. And we should be joined by Alderman Samantha Nugent of the 39th Ward soon too. So I am very honored to introduce our moderator, Senator Duckworth. United States Senator Tammy Duckworth is an Iraq War veteran, a Purple Heart recipient, and a former Assistant Secretary of the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. She has a history of being a trailblazer. She was among the first handful of Army women to fly combat missions during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Senator Duckworth served in the Reserve Forces for 23 years before retiring at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in 2014. She was elected to the United States Senate in 2016 after representing Illinois' 8th Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. She also co-founded the Senate's first ever Environmental Justice Caucus and continues her lifelong mission of supporting, protecting, and keeping the promises that we've made to our veterans. So while she has amazing professional credentials, all of which I did not even get through tonight, she also has a very wicked, clever sense of humor. So I'm now happy to turn it over to Senator Duckworth for a description of tonight's format. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner Degnan, for that introduction. I am so honored to be here today as the moderator of this panel, What Government is Doing for the Environment. We will now begin with a series of prepared questions for the panelists, followed by time for the panelists to answer questions from the audience. The audience may submit questions through the Zoom chat, and panelists, for the sake of time, you are asked to keep your answers under 5 minutes each. At 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, I will turn it over to Commissioner Degnan's team for audience questions. So with that, let's begin. I'm going to start off with the two panelists who are here right now. I'm going to ask the Commissioner to please introduce yourself. How did you become interested and involved in environmental advocacy in the public sector? And can you provide a brief overview of what has led you to your current position in government as an environmental advocate? And then after her, I will ask Alderman Waguespack to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And before I get started on my response to that question, I also wanted to mention that we are now joined by Alderman Samantha Nugent of the 39th Ward, and she will be answering questions shortly as well. So thanks, Alderman Nugent, for popping in. So I'm Bridget Degnan. I was elected to be the Cook County Commissioner for the 12th District, which covers much of Chicago's north and northwest side, and it lies entirely within the city of Chicago. My district covers parts of 14 wards, so I have what I consider great relationships with the 14 aldermen that work very hard on the city council. And I was elected in 2018, so I am most of the way through my first term. I love my job. I love representing this district, and I love the work that we do at the county. So I grew up on the Chicago's northwest side, and before becoming a commissioner, I received my undergraduate degree in environmental engineering with a minor in industrial engineering. Immediately after my undergraduate, I started serving in the United States Peace Corps at the age of 21. So from 21 to 24, I lived in a mud hut in Mali in West Africa. I didn't have any running water. I had no electricity. I learned to speak Bambara, and I learned a lot about natural resource management. I basically was there to help plant trees and reforest parts of the Sahara Desert to stabilize the soil. In connection with that, I became very close friends with the villagers, and I learned a lot about environmental activism and all of the joys that we have as Americans and the education we have about the environment that's not shared with developing countries. So after my return, I worked as an environmental engineer for about 4 years, directing field crews throughout North America. There was a lot of dirty work, like removing underground storage tanks that were filled with petroleum heating oil and digging up buried garbage. So after graduating then from law school, I served as an assistant attorney general in Illinois, filing civil cases against polluters. So after that, I worked for a time in a trial law firm. And then from 2013 until I decided to run for county commissioner, I served as the deputy general counsel of the Illinois Department of Public Health, and then as the deputy director of the medical cannabis program in Illinois. I started that program, wrote the administrative code to regulate dispensaries licensed under Illinois' medical cannabis program. So I guess, in a nutshell, really, environmental advocacy is something that's come very naturally to me. And now being in a position to highlight, in a legislative position, highlight and work on environmental advocacy measures is really a total dream come true for me. So I think we all know that legislators have a North Star, something that is the reason behind their desire to be in public office. And really the sparkle for me is laying a plan down and then step-by-step execution. So I think government doesn't always work really fast, but when we finish something that we started, almost nothing feels better. So for me, that's been my work in Chicago and Cook County on environmental issues and working with experts in this field and pulling in novices who then also develop a love for the environment. So we can talk a little bit more about those issues as we move forward in the evening, but that's really why I've developed a love for the environment and the advocacy behind it.
Wow, that is fantastic. My deputy chief of staff is a former Peace Corps volunteer to Mali as well, and speaks Bambara also.
What is it, her name or his name?
Huh? Her name, Kelsey Becker.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
I'm sure that we have a lot in common, I'm sure.
Yeah, she was there in 2011, right when the Civil War happened.
Oh yeah, it was a tough time. I think they got pulled out and then
yeah, she got pooed out.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you should get together with and she's from the suburbs also, so you should chat with her sometime. I'm going to skip over State Rep Ann Williams because she's not going to be on here. I know that her staffer Lauren Schmelzer is on here, who is also a former intern of mine. So Lauren, you get ready. You're going to get to ask a question, but I'm going to go on to Alderman Waguespack to answer the question and introduce himself. And how did you get interested in environmental issues?
Well, thanks, Senator. How's my sound? Can you guys hear me okay?
You're great.
I think I might have been the echo on the call here, but it's always great hearing the background of my colleagues and what kind of work we're getting done at all different levels of government. I actually grew up partly in Colorado and on different farms, started dealing with environmental issues early on, conservation efforts, talking about drought and water and access to water in southwestern Colorado. So, shortly after graduating from college in Colorado, I ended up going to the Peace Corps too in Kenya. And I served in sort of the northeast area along the Somali area. So it was a similar topography to Colorado in some ways. And a lot of the work that I focused on was getting clean water into schools and health clinics that we were building and different hospitals, so government-run hospitals or actually Catholic mission hospital. And our biggest task was trying to get clean water and access to a lot of the children and families that needed it. So in similar way to what probably was going on in Mali, the climate is pretty much the same. I think a lot of the work that Peace Corps volunteers do is similar in many ways. We might be doing forestry work, we might be doing water tech or engineering, trying to build wells or water systems that hospitals and clinics can use. But it's all about trying to get clean water to people around the world. And I think that's something every Peace Corps volunteer can be proud of. And also just learning from those different communities the same way I think we do and have to do when we become elected officials here in Chicago, in the county, the state, or senator as you do for the entire state, or the whole country. So I think having that background experience has been really helpful in the way it's shaped as I move forward. And years later, I was working in, during law school, working in the Balkans and Kosovo, Albania. And one of the things we were doing there in between work like refugee repatriation and war crimes work was environmental issues. So trying to find ways to clean up the beaches, clean up the different towns, and do waste diversion after the Kosovo War was over, because a lot of that stuff doesn't, disappear. If it's on the street, you got to figure out a way to build up the systems again to do waste diversion. So that was an interesting time for me. But getting into Chicago politics early on in 2007, one of the issues that I had was looking at environmental issues. And in some of our areas, we had a lot of problems with old plating companies that were closing down. What would we do with those? How would we start changing things to make the local neighborhoods cleaner and better? And so working with our different communities, that's what I really focused on. And as working with a lot of my colleagues here on different issues like the plastics free ordinance, which we can get into later, working with our elementary schools on different ideas around our neighborhoods that children can tackle, because we don't always teach environmental issues in our elementary schools or sometimes even in high school. So it's great to see our schools participating locally and really focusing on the climate issues that I think Chicago needs to, everything from recycling to tree canopy, which I'm working on with colleagues as well. So that's kind of just a little bit of background, and I'll save the rest for when we do the deep dive on the issues. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And Alderman Samantha Nugent, I'm so glad you can join us. Would you like to introduce yourself and talk about how you got, what was your path to becoming an environmental advocate?
Sure. Well, good evening, Senator. It's good to see you and to everybody on the panel. Great to see everybody. A very happy Earth Day to everyone. It feels like this is the year we can celebrate it. I have been working in government for my entire career in all levels, from town council, local state rep races to presidential advance. I've sort of done the full gamut. I was elected as alderman in the 39th Ward in 2019. I'm in my first term. Before I was an alderman, in addition to kind of working through all levels of government, I'll pick a few jobs just to kind of give you an idea of how unique the experiences were. I was chief of staff for the Cook County Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So counterterrorism, man-made disasters to natural disasters. And Senator, I know you're familiar with all these things, right? Whether it's bad actors, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, homegrown terrorism, to tornadoes and earthquakes. And I did the Ebola response in 2013 to 2015. And so I felt very uniquely prepared for a pandemic, although I would never wish a pandemic on anyone. But I also was a vice consul for the British Consulate for several years. And so I worked, on the international side. I've worked for procurement. I used to work for the National League of Cities. So I think all these experiences sort of teed me up for the current role, but also an important job that I did have when I was in law school. I clerked in environmental litigation in the Attorney General's office. So that definitely honed in the focus on the environment. I've always been interested in the environmental issues, and I'm always kind of looking for ways, how do we move the needle in the right direction? In my role in City Council, I'm the vice chair on the Energy and Environment Committee, which I think is critically important. I'm very excited to be a co-sponsor along with fellow panelist Alderman Waguespack and Alderman Cardenas, who's not with us tonight, on an urban forestry advisory board that we're working on, that we'll probably speak to more later about how we can increase the tree canopy here in the city and be thoughtful with that. But I also am incredibly excited for this moment we're in right now. We're in this world, right, where we have these finite resources. We have to protect those resources. And I've always felt a really strong sense of responsibility. And how are we a steward of our natural resources? And I think with this new administration, with your leadership, Senator Duckworth, with the United States back on board with the Paris Agreement, with the commitment from the Biden administration to reducing our carbon footprint, having Secretary Kerry back in there and having a cabinet level position, we have the support from the top down right now. And we've always had environmental support at the grassroots level, but now, you know, we have top down and bottom up. And I feel like we've really hit this sweet spot. And even better, we're seeing that being green can be profitable. And we're seeing a rise in green businesses and how we incentivize those businesses. And even Elon Musk is awarding $100 million for a carbon removal project. So we're no longer debating, at least in my people I associate with, we're not debating the existence of climate change anymore. We're trying to course correct. And to me, that is just so incredibly promising. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of this movement with all of you. So thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight.
Thank you so much. Wow, such interesting backgrounds, and everybody has an international background. That's so fantastic. I'm going to go back to the commissioner. Commissioner Degnan, how did the Cook County, you get the first of the series of the questions, how did the Cook County Environmental Commission come to be? And can you explain your role as chair and the collective legislative priorities and goals of the commission?
Yeah, so thank you. When I first started in this role, we went around and talked to as many environmental advocacy groups as we could to see, you know, what the lay of the land was and how we could support those active groups. And what we realized is that there's a lot of policy that's been developed, and there's been a lot of research and data and papers and peer-reviewed studies. And those are all really important, but where the rubber meets the road is executing that policy. And so what we thought we would do at the county was to create a commission of 9 environmental experts. So it was actually my first piece of legislation that we drafted and passed, and we created this environmental commission. So we bring together 9 people that are experts from different sectors. For example, we have an environmental economist, we have somebody from academia, we have somebody from the not-for-profit sector, from the museum campus. He's actually a conservationist at the Field Museum. And then geographically, we have environmental experts from the northern suburbs, the southern suburbs. We have somebody that works in, you know, a Fortune 500 company to represent the business sector. And then we reached out to Mayor Lightfoot and asked her to appoint somebody who was on city council so that the county and the city would be working collaboratively. So as a chair, I work with everyone on the commission to set our agenda and goals and find a way for us to reach those goals in a timely and very pragmatic manner. So every term, we select 3 goals. One is an easy goal, one is a medium difficulty goal, and one is supposed to be very challenging. So this term we have industrial composting, which at large scale arenas, which is supposed to divert food waste from the jail system, the hospital system, large arenas like the United Center. And that, I would say, is a very difficult goal, getting people to think about industrial composting and developing a toolkit and talking to those folks about how to incorporate that into their operations. It's just foreign, it's different, and it's difficult. So that's our difficult goal. We are working to increase the tree canopy in Cook County and specifically in Chicago. That's our medium goal. And then the easy goal is supposed to be amending the City of Chicago's weed ordinance to allow for native gardens. Now, while you might think that is very easy, it has not been as easy, but we have been connecting with all the 14 aldermen that touch on our district, and we've had very positive responses, and I believe that hopefully we will have enough aldermen to sponsor that and to push it forward, hopefully in 2021. So all of those goals provide active and tangible ways that we can, on a grassroots level, get involved with efforts to protect the environment. And that was really the whole purpose of that environmental commission, wasn't just to develop the goals, it was to pull goals that other people had already done the policy papers on and for us to execute. Another thing that we had worked on is the CPACE program. The city has a CPACE program, but basically it's this commercial property assessed clean energy program. And what that does, it allows building owners to get an upfront financing loan to cover qualified upgrades that are aimed at making those commercial spaces to be more environmentally friendly. So you can get 100% of that cost up front, and instead of you being personally responsible for that loan is affixed to the building, so that if you sell the building, then the next property owner would pay for that loan. And it shows up as a line item on your property taxes, so that it's not something that you have to pay month to month. You only pay it twice a year. So that is a really great program, and we're hoping to get the word out and encourage as many people as we can to get those qualified upgrades.
That's
And,
fantastic.
Yeah,
So solar schools for CPS.
Yeah, so solar schools, I wrote this legislation creating a solar schools program. It provides funding connection with the Illinois Clean Energy Foundation. That foundation gives up to 90% of funds for solar panels. Schools weren't accessing those funds, so we came in and did the bridge funding for the last 10% for schools. We found this special purpose fund at the county that generates small amounts of revenue every time a truck goes in and out of a waste transfer station. And that fund has been growing and growing. So we pulled that fund money and give it to schools, so they get 100% of the funding for the cost for the solar panels, the implementation, and the maintenance of them. And then those schools can then have STEM programming in order to find out how the solar panel, how much energy is pulled in during different times of the year, with really the goal to get kids more interested in science and engineering, and especially girls.
That's so fantastic. Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Schmelzer, who is my former intern, and now she's a chief of staff. I mean, this is a long way in a short amount of time. Can you chat a little bit about what Representative Williams is doing, and just introduce her to the people on this call today, and maybe some of her priorities?
Of course. And I must say, it was an amazing opportunity to be an intern in the office a couple years ago. Very formational for me. And so I thank you for that opportunity, of course. And now, of course, I work for Representative Ann Williams, and she is in Springfield right now on the House floor, and is very sad that she wasn't able to attend, but sends all of her best wishes. So we are deep in the work that is passing a clean energy bill right now. So Rep. Williams is the lead sponsor in the House of the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which, just a refresher for people who may not know, it provides more than it provides for 100% clean energy access by 2030. And carbon-free Illinois by 2050, with pillars for a strong focus on equity in the way that these new clean jobs are available to different communities who've been impacted by the climate crisis. So a focus on environmental justice and making sure that as we move towards a clean energy economy in Illinois, that we lift everyone up along with that new economy. And so this bill was introduced a few years ago, and there has been conversation over these years about how it can address every part. When you have a large energy bill, it takes a lot of talking to all the different stakeholders, trying to make something this big happen. And so we're getting to the point now where so many of the stakeholders have come to the table to hash out the different approaches to how we might bring Illinois into a clean energy future. And we're very, very hopeful that by May, the end of this year's legislative session cycle, that we'll have a clean energy bill ready to put on the governor's desk. And it's a matter right now of getting all of the stakeholders to the table and bringing together all the different ideas, which we hope the Clean Energy Jobs Act will be the basis for that legislation that moves forward in the spring. And it's just a matter of getting everyone into the conversation at this point.
Thank you. Wow, that's fantastic. I'm going to go on now to Alderman Waguespack. Last year, alongside several environmental agencies like the Illinois Environmental Council, the Alliance for the Great Lakes, the Recycling Coalition, and students from William H. Ray Elementary Wow, that's quite a coalition you put together, Alderman. You drafted a plastic-free water ordinance, which would ban single-use plastics in Chicago by 2021. You mentioned it just now. What work still needs to be done to advance the goals of this ordinance and to see it come to fruition? And how are we pulling together such a wide variety of organizations to come together to work, a coalition of forces to work on this?
Well, thanks, Senator. I think the easy part was trying to get the coalition together because everybody was already focused on this issue. When you talk to everyone from, Friends of the River included, Shed, Field Museum, I think Carter O'Brien's name was mentioned. We've got great people that are focused on these issues, and they've been looking at them for many years. So getting these kind of coalitions together is, I think, getting easier. So when we look at I think Alderman Nugent might talk about the Urban Forestry Advisory Board. You have people really coming together, working on issues at the different levels of government, making it a lot easier. And so the coalition, I think, is very strong. With COVID hitting, the restaurant industry got hit pretty hard, and we're giving a little bit of leeway there for them to kind of get back on their feet. But talking to them at the same time saying, look, we need to make some changes. Now's the time to do it, or at least make sure this discussion continues to move forward. When we look at the single-use plastic waste in the city, it's not too uncommon from other places. When we're trying to convince people to do these things, we want to make sure we give them incentives to do it. And I think for the restaurant industry, it's cost savings. If they look at it differently than the way they had in the past, that it was something easy to do to kind of put those plastics out there, for instance, cups and paper and forks and spoons that we all get. You open up the package and you say, I have, utensils here. I didn't need 10 other pieces that could end up in a garbage dump. So when we look at what other cities are doing, there are bans in Europe. There are bans in Canada. There's other cities that are moving forward. When you go to other countries in Asia, you actually have to pay for any of those additional pieces upon request. So, but it's very easy to do once you get into that culture of doing it. So I think, we're going to continue to work with all our colleagues on the council to try to move that forward in a way that doesn't hurt the restaurants, but also shows them like there's a better way to move forward. And when you mentioned William Ray Elementary, I think it was Governor Quinn who was helping pull those signatures together for those kids to come and petition. And it was great to see children coming forward. Before we hopped on this call, we saw some kids running around giving kisses to parents. And to me, it's about that future generation. Whatever we can do now to reduce the plastics, to do what we can at the city level, county, state, and again, federal, I think it's going to be important. And I know that at the federal level, there's a much larger effort underway to reduce plastics as well with your colleague, Senator Durbin. So I'm really looking forward to what we can do here in Chicago. But, if the federal government steps in, and I know we'll discuss that later, I think it's fantastic to see that across the board, we're all focused on these environmental issues together.
Thank you. It is a significant change in our culture. I think I'm so glad that you mentioned the culture. It's a significant change, but once you get into it, it's just what you do. If you need it, then ask for it, right? And just like when we first started talking about having to pay a penny or 5 cents for a plastic bag, there's a lot of upset people, but now it's just standard thing. Everybody brings your own reusable bag, so the culture can change. Alderman Nugent, what initiatives have you undertaken to develop an infrastructure in Chicago that encourages, in particular, sustainable growth? And what do you, in your opinion, what is the role of the City Council in addressing Chicago's not very good 9% recycling rate? And how do we reduce pollution produced from congested elevated train systems and gridlocked roads? That's a lot to ask. So take your time.
So let's part and parcel them out a little bit, right? So let's talk about sort of the things I've been able to work on the infrastructure side of the house. Alderman Waguespack and I have definitely been working on this Urban Forestry Advisory Board, which would be an advisory board. First, let's keep saying advisory, but it would pull folks from city departments that naturally touch trees. Think streets and sanitation and water, all of those folks that are naturally working with our urban canopy, but also pull in arborists and folks like that to have a bigger conversation about how we can preserve and protect our canopy, and maybe offer up ideas and suggestions on how we can collectively work together smarter and better, because we're losing a substantial amount of trees each year. And in addition to helping with the carbon footprint, obviously having more trees and a better canopy helps reduce the rates of asthma and things like that. And so there's just, we can talk for 2 hours tonight about why it's so important to have trees, but that is something that is important to me, and I know my colleagues, and something we're looking to move forward. Something else on the infrastructure end for me that was incredibly important this past year is I was able to move a conservation easement for the North Park Village into perpetuity. And that was a really big deal for me, that and for the residents of 39 and the city and anybody who enjoys this property. And for folks that don't know it, North Park Village is a 155-acre campus. It's in the 39th Ward, and it has, I made sure to list all the things, and I'm going to look down because I don't want to leave off anything. So it has senior housing, affordable senior housing. It has the Peterson Park. It has the Peterson Park Gymnastics Center. It has the North Park Village Nature Center, community gardens, walking, biking trails. It has a waterfall. It has sports fields, and it has playgrounds. And I cannot unilaterally take credit for this. There's been folks that have been advocating for the preservation of this property for many years, and they really started getting very strong in their activism in the late 80s, specifically around 1989. The community came together to get that original easement, and we were able to move it over the finish line. And I want those folks, I want everybody to be able to enjoy that property and not worry that a strip mall or a grocery store is gonna go in there. So that was a huge win for all of us. I think it's a big deal, and I encourage everybody to come visit that property. Senator, you're right. We have a real bad rate of recycling here in the city of Chicago. It's disgusting. We're south of 9%, and it's infuriating. So what do we do? I've been really involved with the mayor's office and streets and sanitation, and the mayor. We don't have a Department of Environment. It was eliminated. We have staff that now focus on environment, and working with them to figure out how we course correct. How do we move this needle in the right direction? So a couple things. We've renegotiated a short-term contract on the recycling. I don't think it's a solve all. I think it's better than what we have right now, but it's not great. And that gives the city a little more time to negotiate a more thorough RFP process and contract. The city's working with a group called the Delta Institute, and they've done some very good reports on waste and how to improve recycling rates and things like that. I was very impressed with the reports they did for Cook County. They're in the process of creating a report for us in the city to help figure out how we do move this in the right direction. And this is something I want to be behind. I don't think that clearly it's not where I want it to be, but it's something that I'm working on. And then Senator, you had mentioned towards the end about the CTA.
Yes.
It's a big deal. So I have a real big CTA station in 39, and they have a goal to have zero emissions by 2030. I want to help them get there. We try to work together with different funding streams to help them in their technologies and how their space looks. Something that I really love about my job, and I think maybe because I wore different hats before, I asked my county partners to help me, Commissioner Degnan, Commissioner Gaynor. We try to work together on funding mechanisms, whether it's reaching out to you as our federal delegation with federal funding streams to help with the greening of vehicles or reducing our carbon footprint, or whether it's invest in Cook. So we're trying to use all these tools to try to help the CTA in our mass transit. Just things that I think of when we were talking about prior career experience. So about 20 years ago, I worked in the city of Long Beach, California as the government affairs staffer for Long Beach Transit. So I was the equivalent of CTA out west. So transportation is pretty important to me. I think there's some real opportunity here. I also think we're looking to rebuild Chicago, the state, right? What do we look like? How do we come out of a post-COVID world, COVID-19? What does that economy look like? Transportation, we are a transportation hub here, and there's the question was about CTA, but it gets bigger than CTA, and I think it's all interrelated. And I really, I'm very optimistic about where we can take this, and I'm excited to sort of keep pushing. And I'd like to see the technologies come quicker. You know, these batteries and all the things that we're trying to work on. It just can't come fast enough, but it's very exciting.
So true. It cannot come fast enough. And I know the next generation and generation after that wants us to get our act together. And I don't blame them.
Yep.
So I'm going to kick this back to the commissioner, and we'll continue with questions. And if you have questions for on this panel, do it in the chat function, and then you'll be able to, we'll get to those questions after this, Commissioner.
Great, thank you, Senator Duckworth. And before we, I have a question for you, but before we get started on that, I was wondering if Trenton could give a little bit of an overview on some of the things that our state senator, Sara Feigenholtz, has covered on the environment and some of the things that are important to her.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Trenton Crawford, and I am the district staffer for State Senator Sara Feigenholtz here in the 6th Senate District. Senator Feigenholtz wishes she could be here tonight, but the Senate's busy legislative schedule is keeping her hard at work on the Senate floor, even on Earth Day. She has a very long legislative agenda, which includes legislation that promotes both job growth and clean energy, including the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which Lauren mentioned, that Representative Ann Williams has been a firebrand on, and has been doing a lot of great work. And Senator Feigenholtz is very supportive. She is co-sponsoring the legislation in the Senate and really wants to focus on putting Illinois on the path to 100% renewable energy and creating clean energy jobs that are needed now more than ever, especially as we see the light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic. Like she said, it's going to put Illinois on the path to 100% renewable energy resources within the next decade, and provide $26 million a year to create workforce hubs that prioritize clean energy job networks and emphasize helping marginalized communities and promoting equitable workforce development, which is really needed. The senator really appreciates all the constituents in her district that have been pushing for this, that have been lobbying for it. And I just want to take the opportunity, even though the senator couldn't make it, she wants you to know that if we can assist in any way, or if you ever have any ideas or have questions about various pieces of the legislation or her environmental agenda, you can definitely reach out. I put her information in the chat box, and I'll go ahead and put it in there again. And she just wants to thank everyone here for all of your hard work and dedication, and also for the members of our community for doing their part on an individual level to help us promote a healthier and greener Earth.
Thank you, Trenton, for being here, and thank Senator Feigenholtz for the work that she is performing tonight and during her entire time that she's been a House rep and now a senator in Illinois.
Absolutely.
So, you're welcome. So for Senator Duckworth first, and then maybe followed by the remainder of our panelists. Before we get to some of the audience questions that we've received, I wanted to pose this final question to you first, and then the Alderman second, and then I can answer last. But what do you think that we need to do to facilitate an advancement in environmental protection legislation and programming at the federal level? And as I know, you are a founding member of the Environmental Justice Caucus and have recently unveiled the Environmental Justice for All Act. Could you describe for us a little bit about what that entails?
Yes, of course. So it started off with President Biden being elected and making it clear on his very first day, and in fact, after his very first few hours in office, the first thing he did was rejoin the Paris Accords. That really set the tone for where we are as a country. And today, we had the Earth Day celebrations, he put together 40 world leaders to talk about really committing to a real goal to end carbon emissions and to cut down on carbon emissions and work towards that carbon neutral future. So where the federal government is that we need to recognize that we have to provide the resources and the leadership to encourage communities to step forward. Everybody wants to do something to help in this. I mean, nobody says, I want to go out and pollute the environment, but we have to make it so that people can actually afford to do it. And that it is something that can be done as we talked about already tonight about a cultural shift, and recognize that, a lot of what needs to be done starts with the federal government setting those goals and then providing the incentives and sending those incentives down to local governments to further provide those incentives. I'll give you an example. One of the pieces of legislation that I've introduced actually allows owners of Section 8 housing to get tax credits for putting solar panels on Section 8 housing. And this makes it's common sense, but we always think of, oh, just put solar panels on. Well, solar panels are expensive. And by the way, if someone is living in Section 8 housing, they're spending a greater percentage of their income on energy costs. These are the people who should have the most access to the lowest cost energy, and yet they pay the most for energy because they don't have access to things like solar panels. So we just have to be creative in government about how we help people achieve the goals that we want them to be able to achieve, we want our society to be able to achieve. My Environmental Justice for All Act, I'm very proud of it. I introduced this, it is bicameral. I introduced it with 12 senators and Congressman Grijalva of Arizona and Congressman Nugent of Virginia. Specifically, the bill does a number of things, but specifically, first and foremost, it amends the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I think this is important because we have not thought about access to a clean environment as a civil rights before. But what it does is that it now will prohibit discrimination based on the different impacts, and it overturns Alexander versus Sandoval. So basically, it just strengthens the Civil Rights Act and says that access to a clean environment is a civil rights. It also, this is something that's happening in Chicago right now. It requires when the EPA or anybody provides a permit for an activity that has an impact on the environment, it requires the EPA to look at cumulative effects under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. So what we have done in the past is if somebody, we have an industrial area in the south side of Chicago, for example, and somebody wants a permit, as we're seeing right now, to recover manganese from automobile parts. And they apply for a permit for that industrial activity. We have only been looking at those permits one by one. We've never looked at them as a cumulative effect in that community. And if you look at the cumulative effects, you'll know that that community has suffered from pet coke contamination, ethylene oxide contamination, and now there's this request for a permit for manganese recovery. So when you look at the cumulative effects, you realize, oh, wait a minute. This particular community, and they're largely Black and brown communities, have really disproportionately borne the burden of environmental pollutants because that is where we tend to put our most polluting industries. So by requiring consideration of cumulative effects, the cumulative impacts, this will help with preventing us from sending the same polluting industries to the same areas. It also codifies the Clinton administration's environmental justice executive order. And this is where it's going to create working groups and basically work on compliance and enforcement and really develop a government-wide strategy for environmental justice. There's a whole bunch of other things. Another one that I'm very proud of is it provides for outdoor access for all. One of the things with environmental injustice is that people in poor communities don't have the same access to the environment as everybody else. I'll give you an example. In Chicago, we have wonderful lake shore, right? On average, the lake shore on the north side of the loop is only shut down maybe one day a year due to contaminants in the water. But if you're on the south side of Chicago, the lake shore there is shut down an average of 39 days a year. So young people on the south side of Chicago, there are folks who've never been to the beach. In the same city, where we're well known for our beautiful lake shore. These are the kinds of things that really furthers the injustice, the disparate access to a clean environment and an experience of a life, with an access to outdoor spaces. And then, of course, I have an environmental justice grant program. It funds grants for research, education, and projects to really address environmental justice and health issues that communities and can actually apply for. So there's a whole bunch of things in there. I'm really proud of the bill. And I think, it's going to do a lot to basically bring equity back into our communities so that everyone has equal access to a clean environment. And then when we come back in with nationwide initiatives for a carbon neutral future, everybody starts off from a level playing field, as opposed to where a lot of these communities, which are again Black and brown communities, they start out in the hole because we have been, they have been adversely affected for decades now. So thank you for asking me about that. I'm super excited about it. And I think we're gonna be able to get this thing moving. Thank you.
Senator Duckworth, thank you so much. And I think it's so elementary that, of course, you would take a look at the global view permits as they come in, and the fact that you have supported that measure to get that done with the US EPA is something we definitely can look at the city, the county, and the state. I mean, the politics of that should be very easy to push through because I think we've talked a lot more about environmental racism in the last few years. And I think now that the legislators that are in our more hyper-local areas geographically are more comfortable with those terms and the way that the multi-dynamic approach is not just reduce, reuse, and recycle. It's not just the 70s kind of very rote, narrow view of things. It's environmental justice. It's looking at the way that we issue permits. It's the way that we look at our waste streams and how not just to divert their waste streams, but to make sure that, that we're using, as Alderman Nugent said, like the best ways to recycle. So I'm glad to hear about that grant too. That's something I will be looking into to see if there's different ways that we can access that at the county to further our environmental initiatives. So thank you for all the direction and work that you're doing in connection with that. It's wonderful to hear.
Thank you. And I have to go, so I'm just going to say bye to everyone now.
Thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to have had you.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
So why don't we turn it to Alderman Waguespack, and then you can, and then we can turn it to Alderman Nugent to talk a little bit about what you feel like City Council could do in order to facilitate advancement in environmental protection legislation and programming.
Sure, and boy, I kind of wanted to hear more from the senator because it's just awesome to see what's going on there. I mean, having us get back into the, Paris Accords is awesome, but I was going to ask her, you have an Interior Secretary now, and Deb Haaland, former Congresswoman, who literally just turned an about face on the Trump orders that went out over the last few years. I think over a dozen of them, maybe more now. And then focused on getting resources to cities. But I mean, I think you can pump a lot more resources into cities like Chicago, smaller municipalities that, your colleagues serve in the suburbs. But you can't just do that. I think we need to really focus too on the public education aspect of it. When you talk to kids that are coming in and speaking to aldermen or county commissioners, it's incredible to hear what they're talking about. And I think we're all focused on that. Our kids, future generations, making sure they get what they need to turn the climate change around that we've seen in the right direction. But a lot of that has to do with public education. And it's amazing how many people we talk to in our wards, our ward offices, that either don't believe in what we're doing in climate change or some of those things, and really just trying to sit down with them on everything from how losing one tree can hurt the environment to what the recycling rates are, which we've talked about. So a lot of that's going to be public education and investing in that, as well as the resources coming for things like changing out lead lines, getting more resources for trees. But I think one of the big things for us, and we've been doing it in our zoning and development work for many years now, is focusing on racial equity impact assessments in a lot of what we're doing. And I've been working with groups like Local Progress around the United States with other of my colleagues around the US and talking about how do we put those into play in a lot of the different projects that we're doing. And then also, on some of the bigger ideas that we have coming through the Committee on Environment. And as Alderman Nugent said, we don't have a Department of Environment, but I think we're getting close to getting back to that. As long as we're focused on the projects, the programs, and the ideas that need to change in the city, and we can move to that Department of Environment again, I think it'll be helpful. But it'll be great to see CEJA passed, have the resources coming that we're sharing with you. You've been outstanding in reaching out to us and making sure that we're thinking through some of the ideas that that our constituents, not just in the ward, but the county, the state, federally, or nationally need. So I really appreciate it across the board. I've never been happier in the time I've been alderman since '07, working with a group of people who believe in these ideas and want to move them. So everything from what Alderman Nugent, with the tree advisory board, it doesn't sound huge, but it is it'll be incredible. And working with you on everything from solar to infrastructure issues, and then hearing from hopefully from Senator Feigenholtz and Ann Williams and others, and about what they're doing as well. I feel like we're in a good position to move a lot of these things forward.
Sounds great. Alderman Nugent, I'll pop it to you. What do you think that the City Council and local government can do to facilitate legislation and programming for the environment?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of what my colleagues have said is 100% spot on. Let me just start there. But we're also in this unique spot right now. Because I kind of, when I was talking about it earlier, where the federal government they are right there. We've never had this moment, and I think a lot of the programming that you see that will come from the federal government, kind of how you were speaking, Commissioner, about how it'll be a little easier to legislate. For example, if we get new rules down from the EPA and then it has to go to the state and IEPA, well, the rules that we have here in the city have to meet IEPA standards or exceed them. And so, hey, if we want to take part and participate in this funding, we got to get good, right? This is kind of a little bit of a condition. And I like that, right? Like, hey, if we want to play in the sandbox and get this funding, well, now our laws have to match up or exceed. And I'm happy to draft ordinances that get us that way. I think that's a win-win. I also think we're also in this new spot with business actively involved in wanting to be green. We're seeing this movement right now of corporate, I think corporate social responsibility, maybe it's been around forever and I just didn't know it, but I have felt it become a real part of corporate structure over the last 12 years. There's that, and folks that are looking to work for like Fortune 500s and larger companies, they are asking to see what is their policy on corporate social responsibility, what is their giving back policy, what does their green business plan look like. And so corporations and businesses are now incentivized. And so I think that it might get easier for myself and Alderman Waguespack to be able to draft ordinances, because there's going to be a push from a sector that traditionally wasn't looking to push as much green legislation, partly because years ago, this was more of an unfunded mandate. And now we're incentivizing businesses to do that, so it's not perhaps as economically detrimental as it might have been years ago. So I just think there's opportunity, and there's also if you want this money, you have to be here or better, and that will just force the legislation, which happy to be there if it gets us moving in the right direction.
I think those are all great ideas. And I think, we as consumers individually and as government consumers have the power of the dollar, and that we can change our behaviors and we can drive consumerism in a different way. I mean, whether or not it is choosing naked produce at the grocery store and insists that things are not wrapped in pop plastic, the packaging and the sheer amount of plastic that we use in the United States and the amount of garbage that we produce is ridiculous. Most developed countries don't produce the kind of packaging and products for garbage, single-use things that we do. I absolutely think that we need to greenify our fleet. I don't think there's much reason why we can't have electric vehicles. I think we need to plot a plan for charging stations, not just in residential areas, but if it's at a courthouse, if it's on the streets, wherever it is, we need to have those charging stations so people feel comfortable to buy those electric vehicles, because putting that onus entirely on the consumer isn't really fair. I think with the amount of tax money that we get, we need to prioritize greening our fleet so that we reduce the amount of carbon going into, in particular, going into the environment, in the air, by people's use of vehicles. The idea that people are just not going to drive anymore hasn't taken hold in 50 years, and it's not going to take hold in the next 20 before we need to reduce that 1.5 degrees Celsius of Earth warming. That is the goal that we need to get to. I also think, third, that we absolutely need to reduce the subsidies that we have on fossil fuels and the subsidies that we're giving to our electric producing and coal-fired power plants. We just need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. So whether that is increasing the amount of solar panels or community solar, which is primed to blow up in Illinois, or really pushing at the federal level, like Senator Duckworth said, on our alternative energies, all of those cumulative consumer individual behaviors, small local government behaviors, and large federal government behaviors will collaboratively reduce our global warming. And hopefully by that point, the people that are brave and the people that are in legislation that can legislate will do so. I personally think that we also need a styrofoam ban, because I think a lot of people don't know that styrofoam never ever deteriorates. It can get brittle, it can break into a million pieces, and while it's not very clearly seen by the naked eye, it literally never goes away. So that to me is a no-brainer. You don't need to have a styrofoam container when you're taking out one hamburger that you're going to eat, and then that styrofoam container lasts on this planet literally forever. So I think those are some of the things that we can do at the county. We can do more locally. I'm just so happy that you guys have been here today to collaborate on this. I know I have great friends at City Council and at the federal and state level. There was one question that I know that I wanted to ask both of you from the people online in the chat. It says, can you tell me how the city green markets monitor how the vendors are supplied with the one-use plastic bags that have been freely supplied and used?
And I think that's from Maxine, who I know there. I know at the Logan Square Market, they try to do a good job of monitoring that and do handouts of recyclable bags. But I think they try to make sure that they don't bring that in. But I guess, we've got the markets coming up ready to start again outside. So we'll have to go out and double check to see that they're doing that.
Sounds good. I know that there was a few other questions in connection with what can we do to get CEJA passed. And I think the answer to that always is going to be contact your local state legislator, whether it's your state rep or state senator. Contact them, go next door, talk to your neighbors, have them call and contact. The more letters, the more emails, the more phone calls that those people get, they will know how important this is for the state of Illinois, and it will put the pressure on them to pass it. The last question we had was, what else can be done to increase the recycling rate in Chicago? So I know that your Department of Environment person was connecting on a sustainability study. Did one of you guys want to connect on that?
I can, so they're waiting the city. Oh, sorry. Here, go ahead first. Sorry.
No, dive in.
Thank you. Sorry. The city, so we have that 1-year gap contract right now. We're waiting on a report from the Delta Institute. They do some pretty impactful work on environmental recommendations, like I was mentioning before with the county. As soon as we get that report back, I think kind of like Commissioner, how you were talking earlier about, hey, these are the hardest of the hard goals. This is my long shot. This is my medium. This is, but that's what I've asked the city to get from the Delta Institute. What can we do right now? Give me some low hanging fruit so we can, it is incredibly frustrating. I think, we're not going to have 100% recycling rate off the bat. That's just not going to happen. I told Delta, I said, give us a real number. Are we going to go from south of 9%? Can we get to 16%? Can we get to 15%? Like, give us a real number. Give us some objective, measurable things that we can do to get there. Because I think that's important for us as residents of the city, right? We want to feel a sense of accomplishment that we're doing that. That's waiting for the Delta study really it's not the prettiest answer, and I apologize, but that is really what we're doing. I think on a personal level, I personally go online and Google all the spots in the city where I can bring batteries and different things, and I do it. I have I'm got my Waze on my phone trying to navigate these places. We have a pretty impressive recycling spot at the North Park Village that I was mentioning earlier here in 39. There's little things you can do. My ward office, we compost, which we've really reduced the amount of trash we've been using by using this, and they change out our bucket every 2 weeks. There is a pilot for composting at one of our schools. So that's something we're working on. I am pushing, and I have pushed the mayor's office with, hopefully contemporaneously, the Delta study will say the same thing, but I do think there needs to be an organics component in the next contract that we do with the city. If we're brown bagging those lawn and leaves, and then it just all goes in the same place, silly. So like, there's a real use to that stuff, and it has a real environmental benefit. We might as well do that. So these are some small things. By no means do I think this is, I don't think we're in a great spot right now. I won't pretend, but these are the things I'm trying to do to move the needle in the right direction. And hopefully at the study, it's my understanding the study comes out this summer, and hopefully we do lots more. But hopefully maybe Alderman Waguespack has more suggestions.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's doing a lot of the little stuff, and I think we're all doing it. It'll be interesting too to see, and I don't know if Lauren can answer this, but new leadership at the state level too. Maybe some initiatives coming down through municipalities that we're cooperating on too, at the level of, I think, for instance, the governor put together an environmental committee or an advisory council. And we do have a person from Chicago, I think Chris Sauvé at the Streets and Sand works on that. But, seeing what leadership comes up with, because we have a lot of new people in leadership at the state level too. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Great. And then Lauren, did you want to contribute to that?
Sure. I was going to say that with a new speaker, Speaker Chris Welch has taken over House leadership. And I think there's significantly more communication between different levels of government with that new relationship that is created by having a new Speaker of the House. So I think there is a renewed sense of collaboration that we're feeling right now in the House, and that has led to a lot of positive movement on energy and environmental legislation, and hopefully on other communication in terms of other environmental initiatives on different levels as well.
That's great. So I know, our environmental commission visited a sorting facility last year, and we learned a lot more about the recycling rates in the city and the suburbs, and how all of that waste is sorted, and then how much of it is used for, end use for new recyclable products. And the reality of it is that nobody's gonna just buy up garbage out of the goodness of their heart. We need to make it, we live in a capitalist society, and we need to make it worth something. And so I think by separating the waste streams into different buckets, it'll allow those waste streams to stay clean, to be more easily sorted, and to be more easily used for second use products. So if it's clean cardboard, if it is glass, if it is plastic that has a 1 and a 2 on the bottom, those are more easily recyclable. Anything above a 2 is pretty much never going to be recycled. And if we can separate those waste streams into high use products, somebody will buy them. It's easier. This one bucket blue box, it sounds like a good idea, but realistically, it's not working. So I think we just need to go back to basics, throw out the entire thing and say what is going to work. And if it is finding a way to just only recycle 3 things, which are, glass and paper and some plastics, or just glass and paper for right now, or metal, whatever it is, 2 to 3 things, then we can grow from there. But right now, I think if it's not working, we need to just completely retool our toolbox, start small and grow it as people get more comfortable. I think it's a lot about education. Everybody wants to recycle. Everybody likes to, to make sure that they're being environmentally friendly, but I think that we need to rejigger that entire puzzle. So with that, I wanted to thank you guys for being here tonight. Thanks everybody for watching. I want to highlight that this panel is a part of a mini series that we have established during Earth Month. Our next panel is, and our last panel is on Thursday, April 29th at 6 o'clock. It's titled What Businesses Can Do for the Environment. And that will be our last sector on our webinars for Earth Month. So I appreciate everybody joining, and thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thanks so much.
Bye.